Okay, it is 3 o'clock, so if we can get everybody together, I think we're missing one councilman. Do we know if Councilman Carwin's on the way, or? Well, we can go ahead and get started, and hopefully he arrives soon. And so with that, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 3 o'clock. This is a special meeting, Wednesday, March 2nd, for our fiscal year 21-22 mid-year budget review and budget adjustments. And so if we could, Madam Clerk, would you call roll?
Councilmember Carwin is absent. Councilmember Leesmeyer? Here. Councilmember Dinas?
Here.
Councilmember Sobe? Here. And Mayor Zimmerman.
I'm here too. I probably made that mistake 15 times in the last week. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just stand for our Pledge of Allegiance if we could. And I see Michael Cano is here, who's the chairman of our Measure DD Oversight Committee, Quality of Life. Michael, would you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for serving as well. And Mr. Samuelson. All right, so we're now on our discussion items. Just going to turn it over to the city manager if you'd like to kind of share how we are going to work our way through the workshop today.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. What we have for you today is a series of presentations from our Public Works Department as well as our Finance Department on the condition of our budget. We typically try to, one day I think we're going to be able to do yearly budgets without having to do amendments, but our economy and our city is growing so fast that we had to all the time come back at mid-year and make adjustments. And what we have for you is adjustments that are going to be made to the general fund, and they trickle down all the way down to how we process our public works projects. So we have a very, very comprehensive presentation from our CIP team today. Our Director of Public Works is going to be leading that presentation, and then we're going to follow with a presentation from our Finance Department, and that will be Margarita Cornejo leading that presentation. So, Mr. Fiddler, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Again, Nick Fiddler, Public Works Director, and good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Today I'll be presenting the fiscal year 2021-22 mid-year capital improvement program update. But first off, I just want to recognize my CIP team who does a terrific job in maintaining this and have gone above and beyond for the past several years. First off, I'd like to recognize Carlos. He is our principal engineer for the CIP program. Obviously, he's instrumental in creating the whole CIP program through the projects, working through the council to identify and prioritize those projects. And then next, Jennifer Hernandez, who is our administrative analyst or management analyst for the program, who's put together most of the capital improvement program book this time. So a huge uplift in this update. And then Diego Gillian, who is one of our associate engineers, who does work on several of the capital improvement programs, and Kevin Boone, who is our newest employee to the CIP program. But lastly, I want to thank Margarita. She has been very helpful and very instrumental in putting this CIP program together. She's the one that tells us where the money is, so the important part. So thank you for letting me take the time to recognize and acknowledge their hard work. So this fiscal year, we're going to work through what we've completed to date. So we have 5 projects that we've issued a notice of completion on, and in the next couple of slides, I'll show some photos of what we've completed. Moving into the Antelope Road safety medians. In the upper photo, you can see the road is wide open with a painted median. In the lower, now there's a raised median separating traffic and providing that barrier. Moving into Premier and Menifee Lakes resurfacing. The upper photo shows the before condition of the roadway, the lower photo showing the improved roadway. And much similar, the Rancho La Vida resurfacing project, very similar to the before and after shots. This project is for Centennial Park, sports field lighting. You can see in the upper left corner photo, that was prior to the lights being installed, and then the other three photos showing how well the sports fields are lit upon completion. Moving into projects that are in construction or bidding, we had a total of 13 projects, 9 of them in construction and 4 in bidding. I'll highlight some of the major projects that we're working through, but as you can see, staff has been very busy. Not only the 5 that they completed, but the 13 that we're currently very at the peak of or starting construction and then getting out to bid. So this is a CIP project on McCall. This is from Encanto to Oakhurst. The project is nearly complete. They just have a little bit of striping left to do on the project, and then we'll issue a notice of completion. This is Lazy Creek. Again, this project is nearing completion. There was a little bit of delays for materials. I understand that part of the materials showed up today, so we'll be able to finish that project. There's been a significant delay because of material shortages throughout the world, and unfortunately this project was one of those that were delayed. The Paloma Wash project, this project, the paving is complete, the striping is complete. Again, there was some delay in acquiring some of the materials. That we have some lighted bollards that are still on back order, and there are some equipment, exercise equipment that should be coming soon as well. But the path is pretty much complete and open to the public. And then moving into projects currently in design, we do have 25 of them. Some of them you can see range back as far as Capital Improvement Program 13, which is the Holland Road Overpass. I will give a little bit of update on that, on the status, but we are moving through several of these projects. You can see some of them are at 100% down to 60 on this slide. What some of the 100% mean, that the design is complete, but we're still working through some of the environmental and permitting processes before we can actually put them out to bid. This next slide is showing some of the other projects that are currently in design and what phase they are in. You can see the one project highlighted in orange. That is a project that we're proposing for this mid-year budget update. Throughout the document, you're going to see some of these projects that are listed in orange, and that's where we've made changes to the capital improvement program. So the Holland Road overcross, I-215 overpass, the plans are 100% complete. We have acquired all the right-of-way necessary for the project. We have submitted the environmental permits. They are in current review with the various agencies. We expect to have those permits by the middle of March. We have already contracted with South Star Engineering to provide construction management for this project. And then we have already executed agreements with the utility companies for the relocation. So we are working through that process. The next steps is we will submit for the encroachment permit to Caltrans. That gives us the ability to work within Caltrans right-of-way. Those applications will be going in March this month. We are in the process of pre-qualifying contractors for this project. Due to the magnitude of the contract amount, we want to pre-qualify and make sure that they are capable of constructing a project of this size. And then we anticipate going out to advertise in May of this year with an award in June, and then ultimately beginning construction in August. So this project ended up falling up into the wrong section, but since we're here, this is actually, I'm sorry, this is the right one. This is in design. This is the Central Park Amphitheater. It is about 75 to 80% complete. We will be receiving a next set of submittals this following month, and then once we get those submittals reviewed, we'll be bringing this back to council for consideration. Moving into projects that are currently on hold, we do have some projects that are on hold due to various reasons. Some of them in regards to improvements to facility projects. We are looking at future facility projects for City Hall PD and the MOC, and some of these projects are in line with that, and we don't want to go and expend money if we're going to be ultimately building a new project. So once we get building those facilities, for instance, the police station parking lot upgrades and the police station upgrades, that's putting money into a project that we're leasing. So we're trying to find an area where we can put those to permanent use and not be at a leased site. And then we're moving into the mid-year CIP requests. We do have some projects that we would like to add to the CIP, which some of them will show up on tonight's agenda. The first one is the Salt Creek Trail improvements. It's $100,000. This is for a feasibility study to extend Salt Creek to the east of Antelope and around the WellQuest facility. We're working with the County of Riverside for that program. Bell Mountain Middle School pedestrian project. This is on tonight's agenda. This was a grant from SB 821. It's a local, it's a 50-50 match project that we're working through. And then Newport Road Raised Medians is a project that we're requesting. This is for design only. It's to get us started prior to next fiscal year. And also, we have a lot of development that is occurring on Newport, so we want to establish a design for those new improvements that are coming along Newport between Bradley and Murrieta. And then AMR resurfacing, $650. This was actually in our in our operating budget. It was using $650,000 in CFD funds. We did find out as we were getting ready to bid this project that the CFD funds weren't completely available, or not 100% available for the project. Only a portion is available through the CFD. So we had to rebudget it and move money from savings in both Measure A and gas tax to fully fund it. It is designed, it will be ready to go out to bid as soon as this, if it's approved from council tonight. We'll issue a notice of intent to bid and be bidding within the week. AMR skate park improvements, that's taking some of the balance that was in that CFD and moving it to a project to house some of the park rangers in that area for security purposes. It's a little building for them to work out of in that area. And some of these projects, if there's additional questions in regards to the skate park or the Central Park Amphitheater, Jonathan Nix is here available to help answer some of those questions as well. Now moving into the mid-year CIP budget updates by category. There's a lot of tables within this section, but so again, the changes that have been made or have been highlighted in orange, just for you to quickly acknowledge which changes were made, and also to note that we've completely redid the whole CIP budget book. Jennifer spent a significant amount of time making sure, going through, adding everything that we appropriated throughout the fiscal year into the CIP has been rectified into the budget book. So we'll have a amended budget book available for you that shows everything from July 1st to March 2nd. Holland Road is in the transportation projects. Obviously, there were 7 to start with. There's still 7. We did make an amendment to Holland Road where we added $2.8 million to that project. Moving into traffic signals, we originally had 2 projects, traffic signals. We now have 5, but 3 of those traffic signals were from past fiscal years. We are just we added money at time of award to those projects, but since we added money funds into this fiscal year, we brought it forward just so you can see what has transpired through those projects. So there was a net of $606,000 that we added to the traffic signal projects throughout the fiscal year. Again, moving into street improvement projects, we originally had one, now we have 7. Some of these are new asks throughout the year. For instance, the Newport Road raised medians, that's a project that is a mid-year request. The ATP La Pedra Road, Bell Mountain Middle School, that's the SB 821 that we're requesting tonight as well. The Sun City and Lazy Park, those are pedestrian improvements. Those were previously approved. The Beth Drive Street was a settlement between the developer and the city, so we added that $60,000 into the CIP. And then the local road study plan, again, that was a grant through Caltrans. It was a 90%, 10% match grant that we're currently in the process of working with a consultant to develop. And then pavement management projects, we have 7. We had originally 3, but we added 4 throughout the project. The Romaland Grid Neighborhood South, that's a project that's in tonight's program. Menifee Meadows neighborhood and the Potomac neighborhood, those were previously approved. And then the AMR resurfacing, again, that's tonight's. That's a new project. And then public facilities, there were originally 5. Now we added 6 projects. Actually, the fire station number 5 is a past year project we're adding additional funds to, and same with the fire station 68. As you're aware, we added $4 million for the new city hall. And then the council chambers AV, that was happened throughout the year. The Civic Center parking lot was a previous approval. And again, with the Community Center Recreation Center project, it was a previous approval between July and now. And then lastly, the Parks and Trails Recreation projects, there's 7, there's 3 new ones. We had the Evans Park design construction, that was an additional work. The Salt Creek Trail, which will be on tonight's, and then the AMR skate park, those are both mid-year. I'm sorry, the Salt Creek Trail improvements and the AMR skate parks are a mid-year requests. And again, the total change in budget is $1,056,000. So this is an overall summary of what changes we've made to the CIP throughout the year between July 1st and today. We started off the year with 23 projects. At this point, we're up to 44. The original budget was 27 million, and now we're at 44 million. So with a net change of 16.3 million. I'll give you a minute to look at that, because the biggest changes you can see where we're added where this was the 1.7 million. That's the mid-year that will be coming today. So to summarize, with your approval of the fiscal year 21-22 mid-year request, we have 5 new capital and projects that will be funded in fiscal year 21-22. The number of funded projects will increase from 23 to 44, and an additional 16.3 million will be funded to the CIP program for a total of 44 million. And with that, I'll stop for any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Fiddler. Council members, this is a good opportunity for us to ask some questions. There was an awful lot of information there, and hopefully you guys were scrolling down some questions. I have a couple myself, but we'll start with Councilman Leesmeyer.
Thanks, Nick. Great job. I have a kind of a pile of questions. So I'm just going to go through these because I started sticking notes everywhere, and it's going to seem really random because that's just who I am. On hold projects, I wanted to understand, obviously I understand the reason we would have on hold the police department stuff, but the park lighting, Cayo Tomas, and the pump track, I mean, we own those. Why are those on hold?
I'll ask Jonathan Nix to help answer some of these questions.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Yeah, for the lighting projects, we're putting that on hold right now because we're trying to move forward with some of the other projects that we have on our plate. And also we're analyzing if we can get a little bit more economies of scale by putting lighting at some of the other parks like E.L. Peterson. So that's why we have that on hold for right now. The pump track is not on hold. That's moving forward. That wasn't on the list.
Oh, okay, so it's just the lighting at the pump
The lighting
track?
at the pump track.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, great.
Before you jump on that same subject, so at one time, Mr. Howell was telling us that he was looking into solar-powered lighting
Yes.
to make it simpler so we don't have to run electricity and conduit and all that. Is that still something we're actively pursuing?
That's part of the reason why it's on hold. We're trying to see if we can get a larger order of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Audie Murphy Skate Park improvements, 350,000.
Yes, as the council knows, we have that little kiosk that we built there for the staff, so we're looking at doing a larger building where it could be kind of a ranger station, so we could have the park rangers out there a little more, maybe even do some programs there. But part of the project is also additional lighting to add some more lighting to the skate park and also the adjacent parking lot, so it's a little bit better visibility and safety at the skate park.
How's, just out of the blue, how's attendance been over there? Are you seeing that there could be a potential nexus to have a second skate park on the east side of the city?
Attendance is pretty consistent, especially, we've added those different days where we have, BMX instead, and we're hoping some of those BMX riders could go over to the pump track instead and have a dedicated area over there. So I think once we build the pump track, I kind of want to evaluate, okay, if we have more of the BMX riders at the pump track, then we have an extra skate day, then evaluate from there. But that's also a good thing for us to look at when we do the master plan update.
Got it, makes sense, okay.
Yeah.
Good with you, you can say.
Okay.
Holland Road Overpass, I just wanted to make sure on that slide 21, you're proposing an amendment of 2.8 million?
No, that's already been approved.
Okay, so just to reiterate, we are fully funded for Holland Road Overpass.
That's correct. We're currently fully funded. I will let you know that there's been a significant amount of increases to construction prices lately, especially with the current situation happening around the world. We're seeing increases in construction costs. So we are going to plan on putting that project out to bid and see where it comes. We might have to come back at some point due to the amount of escalation in construction costs. But right now we feel like we're fully funded.
Okay.
Councilmember Leesmeyer, if you recall, when we brought the surplus funding to the council, we asked the council to allow us to dedicate that amount, 2.6, towards the Holland Road Overpass.
Okay, so that's what we're reflecting here and not an
Yes.
additional, okay. Just want to make sure that's clear. And then kind of an overall question with, we went through the different slides of the different categories, public facilities, signals, roads, blah, blah, blah. How does the programming of those different accounts and different projects rank with the prioritization from the CIP and their priority ranks?
We're proposing all projects that were priority number 1 or something that we received a grant for a match.
Okay.
So if the only ones that wouldn't be a priority 1 were the ones that were received a grant.
Okay, see, these are all priority 1 projects?
Yep.
Cool. And I'm good. Thank you.
All right, next on the list is Councilmember Sobe.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you, Jennifer. I think we've met you before, but I see your name a lot on reports, and so it's just nice to put a face with the name. So good job on this presentation packet. So I have a question first, page 4. So the great on the CIP project that's completed on Antelope, but as you do see, even looking at the after picture, Antelope looks like it could be repaved. So I just have a question on that. Is that anything we're looking at?
We do rely on our pavement management system and prioritization, but we will look at it. It does look, because of the tie-in, it doesn't look very well, but it's something we will consider as we're moving forward into the CIP program.
Okay, because having that new medium there and then the way the road looks, it doesn't look like it should be up to our city standard, new, better, best, so, okay. All right, this one is for Jonathan, page 15, the CIP project design for the Central Park Amphitheater. I could just, I thought that from our time frame that we had, we were gonna see this in December, the design complete. Can you tell me where we're at in the timeline? I mean, it just seems like it's been really delayed.
Yeah, we've had some delays. We've been meeting monthly with TY-LIN and going into extreme detail on this. We did hear the council's request to look at this and make sure we stay within budget or even reduce some of the costs. So we've been going with them and looking at, the glue lam, the wood structure. What kind of materials are we using for that? Going into details on, around the bottom, what kind of planter material we're having on there. So because we've been going back and forth and also reviewing with our planning, engineering, and building on this project, that's why it's taken a little longer, because we really dug into those details. So they're going to have a completed engineering and design package to us within the next month for us to review, also with an updated engineer's estimate. So once we have that information, we plan on bringing that back to the city council sometime around May, just to check in with you guys and say, okay, this is where we're at with the complete engineer's estimate. This is what we're estimating the construction cost is going to be, hopefully within that budget that we've already proposed, and then get the council consensus on moving forward.
So with escalating construction costs, as we're hearing, which we've heard about all year long, especially with COVID, the delays and such, yes, we can ask you to do your best to keep those costs down, but I understand, I can only speak for myself, that there could be possibly some cost increase because that's just what's happening with everything else. So just wanted to share that. I do hope it comes quickly. I was hoping that we would have it by summer, out there, but looks like it'll be another year. So thank you. Thank you on that. Yeah. So it was mentioned on the Salt Creek Trail on page 18, mid-year CIP request. Could you say again what that feasibility study was going to be, the 100,000?
I'll take that one, actually.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
We've been working with Riverside County. That's actually funding that they would provide to us. We're working on an agreement with them. This is an allocation so we can expend the funds once they come in. So within the next month or so, we're going to be bringing an item for council consideration to have an agreement with Riverside County to receive the $100,000 and do that feasibility study to look at where the trail is going to go, because it goes right behind WellQuest and ends. So, and we've had some issues. We've heard from the folks living out the Oasis, some of the issues behind there. So that's what the study is for, to look at where the trail goes from that ending at WellQuest behind the Oasis into the city line.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
I know it's been a request I've been hearing from a lot of residents.
Yeah.
That when is that going to get done? Okay. I think that's all. Okay, going back to Nick. Street improvements. So on the street improvements on page 23, I thought, and maybe it's not a priority one, but I thought that the Willows neighborhood in the Menifee Lakes was going to be funded mid-year. Street resurfacing for the Willows neighborhood, and it's not on there. So I know on the map that, on the pavement management, when they did the maps, that came up as one of the neighborhoods that was largely at need. So if it's not on there, and it can't be on there, I thought it was going to be on there, and I just want to keep putting it out there that is a neighborhood that is highly, the rest of several of the other neighborhoods that were built in 1989 and 90 in that area have been completed. I was told 4 years ago on the city council that it wasn't you, a different director, but that the city was moving east starting with streets in the 60s, 70s, and they were on the 80s and 90s. So Menifee Lake started getting done, but it has stopped. So there's actually 3 neighborhoods that haven't been completed.
Oh, Ms. Sobe. So about 3 years ago, we did a slurry seal on that neighborhood. It was just a slurry seal, nothing significant was done.
Not on Willows.
On the Willow neighborhood, that's south of Holland Road? No, that's.
North.
North of Holland Road. Oh, that's a
North,
different.
and it looks, what happened is, before either one of you were here, there was an effort made by the city to go do a crack and seal, and they actually stopped it halfway through, and that neighborhood looks like a jigsaw puzzle through that area. And so it just has been one that the residents, I have shared with the residents the information that was given to me, but now it's my word because now that hasn't been completed. So I just want to put it out there that this has been an area for several years that they were told it's going to be done.
Councilmember Sobek, we are moving into the fiscal year capital improvement program. We'll definitely look at that. One area we just completed this fiscal year was the Premier
Yes.
area, which is
Yeah, that was
is
one
right
of the
there.
neighborhoods,
Yeah,
yes.
so we are trying to systematically go through it, but we'll analyze that one as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
I think that's all I have.
All right, next up is Councilman Carwin.
Thank you very much, and before I go, I apologize for my tardiness, emergency in my day job. Couple of easy questions I'll ask first, and then a hard question. One, as a result of my tardiness, I don't know the answer to this. On the budget updates, what does ATP stand for? ATP Sun City Community.
Active Transportation Program. So that's more of making ADA accessibility improvements throughout that corridor, putting in ADA accessible ramps so they can, at the curb returns or walkways.
And when that says Sun City Community, what is the boundary of that project?
That's Diego is working on.
So, yeah, I believe that's around the Cherry Hills area, right, where we have, so is the Cherry Hills in north of that Cherry Hills Plaza? Just looking for that one. And then on Bradley Road, the scope is limited. It's about 15, 20 ADA ramps around that shopping area that we need to upgrade and make ADA compliant.
Thank you. And other simple question is on page 24, we're talking about adding the neighborhood east of Bradley from Potomac to El Rancho. I really like seeing that on here. We had talked about that. We had added that. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure I understand this number here. The total change in project budget, is that an increase of $657,000 from the prior projection or from it not being on the list at all from zero?
So the total is what has happened to date. The orange number that was reflected in that column is what has happened to date throughout the fiscal year, and if there's a project that's in the mid-year budget ask. So that's a combination of where maybe we have awarded a project and we had to appropriate additional funds, or we've added projects throughout the year, like the ATP projects. Once we got those grants, we added those projects to the capital improvement program. And then if we're coming for a mid-year budget increase, that would also be reflected in that number.
Thank you. And then my last question is the more difficult question. Bradley Road Bridge over Salt Creek. I know that it says that it's 90% completed. I presume that that other 10% is the federal funds that we're waiting for and the potential environmental study that's being done. Is there any strategy or additional options for funding? We keep talking about funding that we're trying to allot. Do we have any funding to move forward with this thing? Because we have no idea how long that's going to take.
So the 90% that you're looking at is the design completion. We are very close to completing the design. We had it much further along until the county built the bike paths that are right there on the north side of the Salt Creek Channel. So the majority of the changes that are occurring right now are to revise the bike path and tie it into the new elevation of the Bradley Road Bridge. Obviously, the Bradley Road is going to be raising about 8 feet at the location of the current bike path. So that's the 10% that we're working on. The remainder of the project's complete. We are working through our environmental as well. The scope of the environmental increased because of the changes that we are doing to the bike path. The approaches to the bike path fell outside of our area of impact analysis. So we had to do a little bit of revisions to our CEQA to account for that. So those are anticipated to be completed later this year as well. We are looking at the funding opportunities as part of this fiscal year's capital improvement program as well. We're still working towards the grant application process. So there is a lot of balls in the air, juggling that we're trying to do to bring that project into closure, but it is moving along very well. We've been meeting with the flood control district on some of their maintenance needs. We've been meeting with the Riverside County Parks for the trail itself. They've all concurred with what we're proposing, so we're making the changes to the plans for the park for that, and then we're working through the various regulatory agencies on the permitting processes. So it is coming together, but you're right, the funding is the question. We did have a $5 million grant in line as part of the build program. We are still hopeful that might come to fruition, but we're not 100% sure at this point.
So specifically, if all of the additional design and environmental studies and things are completed, and we still don't have that $5 million grant from the federal government, are there any other options that the department is looking at for funding sources so we can move forward with that project once it's shovel ready?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, I see no other speakers. I did have one, and it's my very favorite project, the Antelope Road in front of MSJC Signal. And it says on page 13, up on the top there, on the top of the list, says 50% design. But it seemed like, I thought we were already past that, and it seemed as if last time we talked, you guys said funding's already been approved, the design's done, we expect to be out to bid real soon here in the next month or so and completing that this summer. But this is 50% design. So can you give us another update?
Diego, is that your project? Yeah.
I could probably give an update for it. So we did, we are a little more than 50% now completing our project. We were waiting for a subsurface contractor because part of our strategy now in the traffic signals is to do subsurface investigations where the poles are going to be placed, that we won't have delays during construction. And so we were waiting on the contractor to go out there and do their work. That delays us a couple months due to their COVID and things like that. They weren't able to get there right away. But we're on target. We're moving forward. We should have those plans wrapped up in the next couple of months to start bidding and go into construction before the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, I really hope that happens. During COVID, there was a great time to get that done before we put COVID in our rearview mirror and have students start attending. I'm concerned about their safety coming in and out of there, that's all, so.
Second.
Yeah. All right, that's all I had on questions. Council members, anything else on that? All right, thank you both for the great presentation and your entire team as well. I believe we have our next part. Mr. City Manager, which one did you want to do? Are we not going to have discussion, just questions? Oh, well, actually, we can open up for discussion, yeah. I'm sorry.
I was trying to go by the rules, but.
Yeah, no, normally we do all that. I don't,
So much
well,
freedom.
let me just ask, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on any of these items? All right, hearing none, we can talk as freely as
Okay.
we like.
You know, this is an overall comment and maybe a question to the council. You know, given the state of the economy, we have a 7.9% inflation rate nationally. You know, we have is 8.6% here in the Inland Empire. So I'm wondering if if nothing else, at least, because don't we have the CIP for next fiscal year coming up, like, next month or something for the workshop? It would be worthwhile to start looking at these projects between what we really need because of the increased funding and what can maybe be put on that hold list until costs are a little more reasonable. I hate to spend extra money on something that's, that is needed but not as a higher priority as some of the other things. For example, the Holland Road overpass. We had costs increased. What we've heard today is nothing but we're going to have, we'll probably see higher costs coming in when the design and budget and estimates are done. To be prudent with our funds, to make sure that the absolute necessary ones, the highest priority ones, we need to, I think, look back and then go over it and see exactly what we should continue funding at the higher rates and what maybe we can hold off for a little while until maybe, the economy comes back into a little more of a balance. And, because I hate to shift money to projects that we need, but then have something after that come that ends up being a higher priority, but we've already spent extra money because of the higher costs. So that's something that a comment, and I don't know how the rest of the council feels about it, but I think it might be worthwhile at least to discuss at the next, at the workshop that we're going to have, and see if there's something we can do about that and to make sure that we spend our money correctly and wisely. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Leesmeyer?
I think that's a great point. I think maybe, along those lines, I know we have projects like that are, wishful projects, if you will. And then there's needs. And as I hear Lisa talk about the roads that need slurry coats and things like that, to me, that sounds like a higher priority because we're going to get more bang for our buck by slurry coating our streets rather than waiting 10 years and having to repave them. So, along those lines, maybe you look at things like that and figure out where we're going to get more mileage out of the money rather than just, spending it on all these inflated costs. But I agree, it's a good point.
Okay, Councilman Carwin?
Yeah, Councilman Dinas brings up a good point, and I wonder if there's any economic projections about the settling of these costs, or are we only looking up from here? Are these costs expected to go back down once things settle? What's the projection into the time? Are there certain projects where the costs are inflated by more than others? Are there ones that they're not? I agree that if we're, if it's $10 for a 2x4 today, is it going to be $4 next year? Or is it going to be $12 next year and 14 and 15? I'm not an economist, so I don't know which way this is going to go or how far it's going to settle back down. And as far as the increase in materials go, I wonder if waiting would save us millions of dollars on some of the projects.
Nick, do you have a crystal ball?
Unfortunately, no, but we have seen some swings due to COVID. For about 6 months, 8 months ago, wood timber prices were through the roof. Those had started to settle back down, but other industries have continued to go up. Copper, steel, PVC, they've continued to rise. So it's anybody's guess of what's going to happen. What's happening in the world today is going to change what happens tomorrow for sure. Just depending on what happens worldwide. The shipping industry has really put a damper on a lot of projects as well. Being able to get the products into America has driven up prices. So unfortunately, I don't have that crystal ball.
Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I think very valid questions and reasonable questions. What we are going to do next is to be able to give the council an opportunity to weigh on the CIP list. In the past, traditionally, we've taken the CIP once we formulated it. But we thought this year we start earlier and give the council an opportunity to share some of these concerns with us early on so that before we put together numbers and projects together, we can at least weigh in and look at the level of importance on projects that you already have prioritized. And with the understanding that you may have different needs and things change over time, we might be able to get the council to help us reprioritize these projects so that if there's an ability to save money, we can. Unfortunately, though, I don't know that a lot is going to change between now and a month from now, and as we continue to move onwards. But we will bring that opportunity and that time for discussion and talk about that and talk about Councilman Dynas' concerns.
Thank you for doing that. Councilman Dynas, Mayor Pro Tem, sorry.
Answer to a lot of things. I just want to, when we look at this, make sure that, those projects that impact our residents most directly should be the ones that we consider the hardest, the one that makes the highest priority. Because, as we see now that, gallon, oil is now what, $106 a gallon? Last time we threw that, and it's probably higher by now. That was yesterday. Once oil starts going up, all costs start going up because everything's made with oil or used to make it. So, yeah, in the near future, I don't see that going down. I mean, even though I didn't play an economist on TV, this was my job. It was to watch that and keep track of the economy to know the impact would be on budgets. So I think, it may be for harder times in the future and over the next year as things go forward. So I think we just really being focused on what impacts our residents the most and what would give them the most immediate benefits. If you look at that, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, there's more to today's presentation with staffing changes that's going to be presented. Is that correct? And ARPA fund use and.
Right, Mayor and council members. What you have here is one segment of the entire budget process. So we thought we'd present this to you first. And the second phase is our fiscal projections and fiscal asks and amendments. And that's going to be presented by Margarita Cornejo, our financial services manager.
Excellent.
And team.
Ready. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor Zimmerman, council members, staff members, members of the public who are here in person, and those that may be joining us virtually this afternoon. As our city manager indicated, the finance department is here to present an overall budget review of our fiscal year 21-22 year. So we have a number of kind of key topics that are involved in that budget review we would like to present to you today. I am Margarita Cornejo with the finance department, and I will be leading this presentation. So before we get into the nitty-gritty and all the details of the mid-year budget itself, we'd like kind of summarize this as your Menifee 21-22 mid-year review stew. And like any good dish and any good soup, it requires a really good recipe with some key ingredients and the right cooking time. So we'll be kind of highlighting those ingredients and components on it as we go through this. So our cooking time, if you will, our Menifee budget process, we follow a fiscal year starting July of every year and concluding June 30th. So here laid out for you is our timeline of kind of how we follow, and if we break it down a little bit more discreetly, we go by quarters, and then we do our mid-year right around February, March, which is where we're at today. And, parallel to that cooking thing, like as you're cooking a dish, you want to check in, make sure it doesn't overcook, doesn't overburn. So that's what we're here to do today, get a gauge on how our stew is going so far. So here are the key ingredients of the mid-year review that we looked at. It's an economic outlook, a revenue analysis, our expenditure analysis, looking at our staffing and personnel, our CIP program, which was provided in detail earlier today. Then looking at our mid-year appropriations. And then this year's stew has a special ingredient that you'll be seeing probably for the next 2 years, and that's our American Rescue Plan, our ARP. So one-time ingredient, one-time funding that we've received from the federal government from the American Rescue Plan that was enacted in March of 2021. So, starting off with our economic outlook at a national level. The two key words both start with V, vaccines and variants. So we've seen a lot of progress with vaccines leading to gradual reopenings, but we've also had some little back steps in variants. Specifically, the Delta and the Omicron variants kind of took us a couple steps back globally and nationally in the fall and more recently in the winter. So at a global and a national level, even here locally, we had to readjust temporarily with some temporary kind of back to remote working and accommodating, doing like, services, counter services. But, the positive news to COVID-19 is that while it's not fully gone, we are starting to see a lot of discussion of, that pandemic word, that P kind of disappearing away and that A converting more into like an E, and we're starting to hear that endemic word more. So we're moving to a more new normal where, unfortunately can't just be wiped away altogether, but we're learning as a society and as a world how we're going to navigate through it, and that leads to more, hopefully, permanent reopenings, and again, getting you adjusted to that new normal. What has that done to the economic recovery at a global level? Well, everybody knew immediately that there'd be some economic impact of that pandemic, that once in a lifetime, hopefully, incident. Nobody knew how deep and how long. For the good news for us, and even nationally, was it wasn't as bad as it was thought economically, but it did lead to it increases in unemployment as well as inflation. So as we are recovering in second year, I guess, of living with COVID, we are at a national level seeing moderate and steady recovery with the 4.1 growth in GDP expected for 2021. But we're also seeing some downside things like global labor and supply shortages that altogether haven't fully been addressed, and they trickle down all the way down to our builders who experience, as our director referenced, things like increases in lumber itself, but also in getting the right staffing that they need in place for there. And most recently, all the headlines keep pointing to the same thing, that 40-year record high inflation prices that we haven't seen since the 80s. The question of how long will they be? Are they sustained? That's that crystal ball question. All economists are looking at it, trying to see how long will it be. Is it sustainable to have prices keep going that high? No. But is it fully in control, or is there like a magic solution to doing it? No. So as we navigate and we move toward the upcoming year, we hope to start to see them stabilize, and we'll keep watching them and seeing kind of, what do the national indicators point to, because in a way they're going to reflect and trickle back down to us. And then more recently, in the last weeks, we have the global energy gas market uncertainty that's starting to make a lot of headlines. I think the LA Times today had an article on that alone, as we have geopolitics coming into play, and you have one of the main producers of crude oil, specifically in a situation of conflict. It is expected that you would see those energy prices go up, especially when they're facing economic sanctions and whatnot. So those will all kind of come to play, not only in our operations, but in the, in the pocket, ultimately, of our residents. Zooming in, literally, into the state and regional economic outlook, things again look better for our state. At the beginning of the pandemic, the state was conservative in their budgeting and anticipated that as a large state, we would be hit pretty hard. Especially since there were a number of, shutdowns and regulations that came to play. Fortunately, in November of 2021, when the state started preparing their budget, they anticipate a $31 billion surplus for their 22-23 state budget, with not only the fact that the American Rescue funding came in from the federal level, but also speaking to the fact that revenues within the state are growing more rapidly than they were originally forecast to be. Regionally, within the Riverside area, we have a stronger labor market than we did a year ago. Regional unemployment rate is now at 6.8, and ideally, in perspective, it is better than it was a year ago, which is a good sign to see that. 185,000 jobs have been added since April of 2020, which was the low in this whole current environment that we have. And there's a continuous and steady growth in residential and commercial development, which us locally as a community, we literally can see that happening before us day to day. Zooming into our Menifee economic outlook, so we have experienced consistent and steady residential development activity in the first half of the year. For us, actually, COVID resulted in a lot of residential activity happening as we saw more people who had, for once, the opportunity to be able to remote, looking to find new homes in our community. As we are going in through this year, as part of the appropriations of this year, we have a number of industrial projects that are in the CEQA stage, and one of the appropriations actually in place is actually to increase the budget, the revenue and expenditures to accommodate additional industrial projects that are underway and expected to come to fruition in the upcoming years. And as we look at our specific economic outlook, and as we build our annual budget, and as we look at our mid-year budget as well, we always look at it from a lens of long-term financial planning. So things that have been enacted during the first half of this fiscal year is specifically in the fall of this year, the city relooked at its reserve fund policy and took it as an opportunity to increase our savings or reserve to 35%, making our reserves one of the most healthy and higher percentages, and made a commitment to look at our reserves every 3 years to see if we have the opportunity to continue to increase that, so that when we do deal with things like inflation or have things that can fall out of our control, we have those reserves in place specifically for those moments of economic uncertainty. We also have made a concentrated effort to always ensure that we pay our unfunded pension liability in full. And as of this current year and our mid-year, we can say that as a city, we don't have any unfunded pension liability, which becomes a big issue for larger organizations that have historic, and that in itself for us, we proactively always look to make sure that we can address that and take care of that bill. And then the larger big picture thing, which was the first half of today's presentation, alludes to our 5-year CIP program. As it stands, it's just short of $500 million. It's a long list of a number of needs ranging from streets to roads, traffic signals, social infrastructure, if you will. And we know we can't accomplish that all in 1 year. But the goal is, and as we strategize every single year, is to chip away at that and build the funding strategy to make these projects come to be. Moving on to our revenue analysis ingredient. So for the city, our two principal sources of funding our revenue are our sales tax, our regular sales tax, as well as our voter-approved quality of life measure DD, and our property taxes. So up here in representation, you have a historical for the past 4 years, as well as a month-to-month comparison. When you look at our sales tax, you do see that in 1920, which was the onset of COVID-19, there was a slight dip in sales tax as everybody adjusted and didn't know what would come from it. But it quickly recovered, and as you see, even when we adopted our budget this year, we were conservative in our adoption as we still were unsure, were we going to go back into shutdowns? Well, our year-to-date, as we report today, is at $4.5 million, and this is reflective through November of 2021. My apologies for the 2022. And that is because we receive our sales tax on a monthly basis, but there is a lag in remittance to us. Based and in consultation with our consultant HDL, tonight we are happy to report that our projections are adjusted to go up for sales tax, and we are making a recommendation to increase revenues by $1.6 million at mid-year. Moving on to the quality of life measure DD, which was enacted by voters on November of 2016. This has truly become integral and a vital source of the city's funding, specific for us to prioritizing and being able to fund our public safety and infrastructure. As you can see from our historicals, 18-19 being the first year we received it, through our actuals to date, DD has continued to exceed expectations and projections even through COVID-19. So it really has become and is one of the main drivers of why we were able to expedite and move forward with doing our own police department. So tonight's recommendation includes a revenue adjustment of moving Measure DD revenues up by $2.7 million. And in relation to our other revenues, specifically property tax, and we wanted to highlight our DIF revenue. We are giving you a historical of our property tax that shows we have a consistent growth in on our property tax base, and as we continue to build and as we continue to add new businesses and support the addition of new businesses to our community, that property tax base should continue to grow healthy and steadily. Our development impact revenue in this particular year has grown very robustly, and we have adjustments, actually not appropriation, but revenue increase adjustments to it as well. And to us, this particular funding is very important and an important source for us to being able to fund CIP projects. So we are appreciative and grateful of that revenue that's coming into us. It gives us an opportunity to start our new upcoming year with a number of projects that you guys have already alluded to. Moving on to the other half, or the other side of the coin, the expenditures themselves. Summarized in three main categories, we're talking about our personnel, our operating and maintenance expenses, and our capital outlays. So personnels are right in line where they should be, 53% as of February. A little under, and that's just a reflection of the recruitment time for some vacancies that we have in place, but we're right in line where we should be. Operations and maintenance expenses as of February are at 30% of the budget, and that is because there are a remaining large number of expenses that are not realized or billed yet, and that is things like our dispatch and our fire contracts that haven't been billed yet. So we're still within budget, and we expect those bills to come in as we close out the fiscal year, but where we stand today is at 30%. And then capital outlays. These are our larger purchases like vehicles and equipment. And where we stand today is at 25%. We have had a number of various large purchases that have come before council. That's things like fleet and vehicles and equipment. But as we alluded to a little bit earlier, there are supply shortages throughout the world. So there are a number of pending deliveries that we're still facing, that we're still waiting for, and we expect those to come through in the upcoming months. So now to discuss our personnel and our staffing, which is vital to keeping the city running, to say the least. When we started and adopted the budget in this fiscal year, we started with 281.65 full-time equivalents, or FTEs. That was represented by 258 full-time staff and 23.65 part-time staff. What we are proposing tonight, or following today's recommendations, is 302.65. That's 279 full-time staff plus 23.65 part-time staff. Please note this does include the addition of 3 additional positions that were approved from July to January of this year under the city manager's approval. But here is a summary of the specific positions that are being requested today. There's a total of 18 new positions and 7 reclassifications. Of the 18 new positions that are being requested, 15 are specifically coming or related to the police department. Of those 15, 14 are sworn positions, and 1 is a non-sworn position. The other 3 positions that are being requested are related to the city manager's office, finance department, and information technology department. And then there are 7 reclassification requests that are being requested by various departments: city clerk, economic development, human resources, and public works and engineering. These recommendations and requests are based on in-depth discussions with the departments based on their request to accommodate the operational needs of each division and every department. So in total, factoring where we started the year, any prior additions that we had, and any additional, and the 18 that are being requested today, there would be an additional 21 new positions from the beginning of the year to now, and 7 reclassifications. Since the bulk of the personnel requests that are being requested at mid-year relate to the police department, we wanted to take some time to really get into the thought and the analysis done behind the police department requests. So our Assistant City Manager, Rochelle Clayton, will go through those slides, as well as our police department.
Thank you, Margarita. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As Margarita stated, of the 18 positions that we are requesting for new positions, 15 are from the police department. So we would like to take a little bit of time to go into more detail on the reason for the need on this increase in the request. This is a slide that I presented to you, we as a group presented to you in December 2020. Just over a year ago, we presented our 5-year financial plan when we came to you and asked for increased staffing at that time. In our 5-year plan in 2020, we projected in year 5 we would reach 104,000, or just over 104,500 population. As you know, we've already exceeded 105,000 based on DOF projections and the steady increase in our residential building in the city. Again, with the increase exceeding what we projected a year ago to already over 105,000, we are requesting to accelerate our 5-year plan because here we are in year 2.5 and we've already exceeded what we projected at year 5. With increased population, we do also see an increase in revenues. And as Margarita stated, our biggest increase is in sales tax, which is not one-time money, it's continuing money. When we did see the economic downturn, we didn't see as much of a dip as our neighboring cities because we don't have those even with the closures, we don't have the large tax producing impacts that our neighbors had, such as the hotel and automotive industry. While we do want those, fortunately for us, we weren't relying on them. And as we continue today, we see a very steady increase in our sales tax revenue based on the type of sales that we have. And with the, again, increased residential, bringing more commercial, more people shopping local, more people eating out. Also, with the increased population, why we're here, we have an increased need in public safety. Our population has just, it's booming. We've got so many residential tracks in the pipeline. Legato's going full force. We have development all throughout. So we're going to continue to see this increase in our residential and our increase in our population, which again, gives the need for increased public safety. So that's why we're here to request, it's a big request, a big portion of the increased revenues will be taken up by the increased expenditures to offset the police department increases, most being one time. The bulk of our increased requests, our expenditure requests are for the equipment to not only equip the officers, but the vehicles, which is a large portion of what we're asking for. Those are the one time, but the increased revenue, again, to sustain, that shows the sustainability is ongoing revenue that we are seeing. So we'll move into the next slide that we presented in 2020. Again, in our 5-year projection with the 104,000 population, we were projecting the need for 87 sworn officers. We are asking for this increase to get us to 91. Again, we've exceeded what we anticipated. We also anticipated a 23.5 million budget with that, but due to one, increased inflation, that as we discussed, but also asking for more positions, this would get us to an annual budget of about 26.5 million. With that 26.5 million, yes, it is a big increase, but it is accelerating us beyond our 5-year plan. And it, as you can see on the bottom portion of this slide, with a modest projection for what would have been an increase with our prior contract with the county, we are still coming under what's projected at nearly 29 million. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the chief.
Thank you, Rochelle. We thought it'd be important to start just where we are with current staffing. We're at 77 sworn. That includes the chief and the captains and lieutenants. So that would be, we're at 60 officers, and then 26 professional staff. That's where we're at now. If you remember the slide we showed in 2020, we compared ourselves to some of the cities. And if you see Menifee, the orange slide is where we are now, and then the purple slide would be where we are if this is approved tonight. And we just thought it was interesting to just look at the total staff from some of the other police departments and where we would be. We're not going to go laboriously into our goals and our measurements, but one of the top measurement is our response times. And so the captains are going to come up and talk about response times and then the staffing ask, and then the equipment that goes along with that, and then all three of us will be available for questions. So with that, Captain Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. Dave Gutierrez. I currently oversee the Investigations and Support Services Division within the Police Department. This is a chart reflective of our current response times. As you know, this is one of our key performance indicators, and rightfully so. It's something that the community and others will look at to see how the police department is performing. Our indicators, our performance indicators, we would like to be at 6 minutes for priority 1 calls, which are those in-progress type calls, 15 minutes for priority 2 calls, and 35 minutes for priority 3. Highlighted in yellow, you can see where we're currently at. They've pretty much stayed steady throughout our existence so far. There's a lot of varying factors that go into response time. But we absolutely are confident that if these requested positions are approved tonight, that this will greatly enhance and enable us to be able to get towards our key performance indicator goals. So I'm going to speak to the investigative and support services positions. As you can see, we're asking for 4 detectives, which will increase our investigative hours by approximately 23 hours per day. Currently, our detectives are actively working approximately 370 cases, 60 to 70 cases per detective. This number fluctuates throughout the months, but sometimes it's a little bit lower. Most of the times it's a little bit higher. The additional detectives will allow us to reduce the number of assigned cases to each detective. A large portion of these cases, because patrol handles and makes arrests, numerous arrests per day, these cases are reflective of those cases that can't be solved by patrol, and so they're transferred to the detective division for further follow-up, and it could be a wide variety of things that could take anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months to solve some of these cases. These additional positions will allow our investigative leadership to be able to assign specific case types, so like crimes against persons, missing persons, property crimes, elder abuse cases, those kinds of things to specific detectives, and they will be able to focus on just those types of those cases, which will enhance our ability to solve some of those cases in an efficient manner. It also will help with our on-call capabilities. Throughout our existence, there's been numerous occasions where our detectives have been tasked with multiple call-outs over a short period of time, and that's very taxing on them, especially when they have to come in the next day and continue work. So these additional detectives will allow for those types of things to occur without any break in services to the community. Our detectives continue to work hard. The additional requested detectives will enable us to accomplish even more, which will result in more effective and expeditious case closures and suspects arrests, which really translates to quicker closure for our victims of crime. The other position within my purview, the support services side, is a property and evidence technician. So we currently have 2 combo crime scene investigators / property and evidence technicians. They do both jobs. Right now, as we speak, we have over approximately 6,200 items of evidence in our property warehouse. So they are managing that in addition to their CSI responsibilities. We have about 3,500 pieces of digital evidence. Those are photographs, all kinds of different paperwork that end up in our evidence.com that they have to prepare for court, when we get report requests. There's just a lot of things that go into that. With the additional property tech, it'll allow us to have our CSI folks available for approximately 50 hours per week to go out into the field and do CSI work, which will be over and above what we're able to accomplish now. It'll allow our our technicians to cross-train our other staff on a more frequent basis to enhance their skills in the field. And it allows for expedited follow-up on lab results and offenders being apprehended from current lead time. So with that, I'll have Captain Carr talk about the operations side.
Thank you, Dave. Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Chris Carr, Operations Captain. And as you can see, we are asking for additional oversight The lieutenant position is essential to assisting with this. We currently have 2 lieutenants working operations. However, they can cover the 7 days, but we're really missing the evening coverage. So this position will allow for us to expand that span and control, provide proper supervision and proper guidance to even our patrol sergeants. The additional sergeant and patrol officers are geared at creating a 7th patrol team. This will allow for us to actually hit our service numbers, reduce those call times, and deploy the right amount of officers out there. What you're seeing here is basically the culmination of about 306 patrol hours, averaging about 13 cops per hour per day on the street. Now we know traffic and we know deployments won't keep it at 13 per hour, but on average. So you're going to have teams out there of 16 officers handling high volume, high hours, as well as upwards of 4 traffic officers, reducing our traffic violators, red light cameras, traffic collisions, DUI offenders. And really specifically adding this commercial enforcement officer. We are a city under development. We are a major corridor for transportation to other nearby cities that have heavy haulers out here. Our roadways are getting messed up. How much money is CIP spending in revitalizing our roadways? This commercial enforcement officer will be there to enforce regulations on weight, driving standards, safety of braking, as well as any other working with Public Works to develop truck routes so that we can actually develop our roadways the right way and keep everybody safe. What you're going to see here is just a snapshot of the requested equipment that we have to support all these personnel. Their duty gear, their ballistics, their uniforms, the expansion of our fleet. Obviously, with additional bodies, we need more vehicles on the road so that we can stretch their lives out and not shorten them up. Currently, we have our standard set, so our vehicles run 7 days a week, but only per shift, so they're not running 24 hours and being what's called hot-seated. This keeps the engines running properly, gives the Public Works maintenance crew the proper amount of time to conduct reasonable maintenance on them without overuse. So adding these vehicles is essential to keeping that lifespan and keeping that 5-year rotation on these vehicles and giving us options of even extending their life beyond the in-car computers, and then the specialized equipment such as that commercial enforcement vehicle, UC vehicles, and others that we've listed here. And with that, are there any questions?
Floor is open, Council. Councilman Carwin.
Thank you. You know, I was asking Councilman Leesmeyer, did we just see this in a recent update? A lot of these numbers look very familiar, but it's encouraging to see the progress that our PD has made and how outfitting the PD. One of the things that I thought was very nice was starting our PD from scratch allows us to outfit the department as we need it instead of trying to strip things away and replace it, which is difficult to match up and expensive. My question for you is on the response times in relation to these requests. And it looks like the goal is a 21 to almost 43% reduction in response times. And I'm just wondering, you say there's many factors. You're asking for 5 patrol officers. Response times aren't detective work, aren't crime scene investigation. That's the initial from the call comes in to law enforcement arrives at the scene. So how does 5 patrol officers equate to an almost 50% reduction in response time?
Well, there's, the added shift would increase at the times where we're getting a lot of calls. It will increase the number of officers. So it's not just 5 officers. We'll be able to weave that in and overlap shifts, so we'll have more officers during the high call volume. And then if there's more traffic officers out there, their primary responsibility is traffic, but if there's a hot call or something and they're close, they go, and that lowers our time as well.
I guess, well, let me stop you right there, because I'm trying to find out what percentage, and I'm trying not to ask this as directly, but perhaps I just will. How much of this is the fault of dispatch?
Well, they have new dispatchers, and they're in train. A lot of those are in training. So if you see the pickup time to the en route time. We would like to shorten that, but that, we don't have control over that, but they have a good training program there, and once everybody's, trained up, that'll shorten it too. So that is a factor. That's a piece of this.
So yeah, that's what I was getting at. So with this, like a reimagination or better training of dispatch would resolve a lot of this gap between column 1 and column 2, which would reduce the numbers. That's about half the number.
Yeah, there's a lot of agencies that don't count that number, but I think it's disingenuous. So
Right.
we do, because we want high customer service, and so does Marietta. So they're working pretty hard on that. They actually have a recruitment for a couple more dispatchers as we speak. So, but again, they have to be trained up.
And since we're contracting with Marietta for dispatch, the training and staffing and everything of dispatch isn't included in this packet. That's a totally separate contract issue.
Totally separate, yes.
So so statistically, just from looking at this, anecdotally, I know you didn't break this down data-wise. If dispatch was running at full training and capacity the way you, Chief, would want them to be operating, what percentage of the times would be saved?
Well, I'm going to let Captain Gutierrez answer that question, because he meets with them almost at least twice a month about just this.
Like, you want to take priority 1 down from 9 to 6 minutes. How much would a well-oiled, perfectly functioning dispatch solve that?
So percentage-wise, I wouldn't want to guess, but I can tell you in my conversations with their dispatch manager that we would like to see that call pickup time to en route drop by 30 seconds to about a minute per call. Again, a lot of factors go into that. What type of reporting party are we talking to? Some take a lot longer to give us the information that we need to get the information to the patrol cops out in the field to handle the call safely. But we are working on that. Some of the other factors that will absolutely enable us to enhance or reduce our response times are in the detective division, because we're going to have a special enforcement team that is specifically working on drugs, vice, and gangs. And a large portion of calls for service that our patrol division gets are attributed to drugs. And so when they can go out there and they can start full-time working on that with the full complement of 4 and the sergeant, and really turning over rocks and solving these we go to repeated calls over and over again, drug-related. And our code enforcement, our current POP team, are trying to manage that the best that they can, but these additional detectives are going to help that, which is then going to translate into a reduced number of calls for service, enabling those response times to come down. It'll also help Captain Carr's division deploy the resources throughout our 47 square mile city, because if we don't have the numbers, or we're not able to deploy them effectively throughout the beats, or because of the sheer volume of calls that are coming in, and all the cops end up on one side of the city or one portion of the city. I mean, depending upon what time of the day it is, you can't even get across town in 9 minutes. So it's even going code 3, because I know the lights and sirens look and sound great, but a lot of people don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that, and it still takes us time to get across town. But we believe, and then if you dial that down even into that property and evidence tech, and it gets our CSI folks out into the field more, our patrol cops aren't doing as much of that latent print lifting and photography and all that stuff. So then it allows them to come off the scene and go out and patrol and get to those calls that are pending a lot quicker.
Good. The reason I'm asking that question, I want to make sure that this is actually going to solve the problem that you're looking for. And it sounds like that's a combination of things, and that's a main factor in it. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councilman. And Councilmember Sobeck's next.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Margarita. What a great presentation. I have a question on the reclassification of our employees, the current employees. Does this mean that there will be any kind of increase in their salary when they have a reclassification?
So it would, because you're retitling, and actually some reclassifications actually is actually a lower one. It's filled by the lower. It's an underfill. It's called an underfill. So it's not like they're going to take a pay cut. It's more like they've been functioning at that lower title. So that would result actually in a savings. But most reclassifications are a promotion up, or a title up with new responsibilities. So.
Okay, and did we have that figure? what that would be? in the budget?
Individually, it's.
Or
not-
in the, just overall?
Overall, yeah, it's factored, but they're lumped together with all the total
With all the total?
positions, but it is factored as part of the appropriation request.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We still have more, there's more on the PowerPoint, so we can take their questions now, or if
Okay.
you'd like to.
All right, so do you want to wait for police and finish this part, or what do you want to do?
It's up to you.
We paused so that you could ask the police specifically, but we can take it whichever order. We do have more slides for the.
Let's go through, because I don't want to waste our time. I know we have a certain time frame, and that will, okay, we'll do that.
Okay. So there's no more questions for police? Okay, so jumping back to the balance of the presentation is the CIP program. Won't get a lot in depth in this one as we had that first half, but this particular slide summarizes where we started and where we are at. Again, we're going from 23 projects to 44, 27 million to 44 million. This does not factor any budget carryovers that were rolled over from prior years. This is all additional requests from July through to today for mid-year requests. And specifically here are the list of 6 projects that involve appropriations. The number here is 621, and that is because the Bell Mountain Pedestrian Project is a separate bar appropriation item that will be considered at tonight's regular council meeting. And the AMR resurfacing project, as well as the skate park improvement projects, have funding available from unused budget within the CFD, so do not need additional increases in their specific budgets. AMR does need $216,000. So this slide summarizes and reflects in there the number of the personnel requests as well as reclassifications. At the top is the revenue adjustment that is being recommended, and again, that reflects the positive budgetary growth that has been experienced overall in general fund. It does also include $800,000 in CEQA revenue, and that provides a total of 3.15 that is being recommended to be adjusted at this mid-year point. Following that is a summary of all the one-time expenses as well as ongoing expenses. In the list of one-time expenses is where you will see things like increases in our insurance coverage, and then as well as some high-priority strategic plan items like the park master plan that was discussed recently in our workshop. As well, and the Salt Creek Trail Improvements Project. We do want to indicate there is a line item for $150,000, which is the Waste Management Bill Assistance Program for senior residents. We want to also indicate that Waste Management does provide $300,000 in dedicated revenue every year for programming and things like this. So this isn't just regular general fund. We specifically receive waste management revenue for purposes for programs and things like this. As far as ongoing expenses of what's being requested tonight, that relates to the additional staff and reclassifications positions. For police in specific, we, for the current year budget, each position to be 65% general fund and 35% Measure DD. And all in all, based on today's recommendations, we would result in a net difference to the general fund of $345,000 that would be available to be added to the fund balance. Specific to the quality of life Measure DD, we are starting our beginning budgeted fund balance at 0, and that is because, as you'll recall, on December 15th, we did provide a comprehensive recommendation of available funds within both the quality of life Measure DD and general fund that were allocated to high priority CIP projects, including the 2.8 to Holland Road. So we're starting our mid-year analysis assuming that all Measure DD has already been allocated and assigned elsewhere. Based on the forecast for the balance of the year, we see positive budgetary growth in Measure DD and are making the recommendation of the 2.71. And that does, it's not the 2.730 because there's a slight adjustment for interest coming in lower than what was originally budgeted for the year. So that reflects that. One-time expenses which are the bulk of the recommended expenditures, relate to all the related police personnel, equipment, and vehicles associated with the recommended personnel. And then $230,000 recommended towards the purchase of a substation facility. Our lease for the current substation in Sun City does expire December of 2022, and so this accommodates budget so we can start exploring the options of where to go forward. As far as ongoing expenses, that is the cost of the personnel for the balance of the year, and again, it's 35% of those police personnel. All in all, it's $2.3 million in additional expenditures that's being recommended. We had prior budget appropriations that factored the rest, so the net difference results in zero to be added to the fund balance of Measure DD. Oh, and I'm sorry. Measure respective to the quality of life, Measure DD, we do want to note that these recommendations were presented to the Quality of Life Committee on February 17th. They reviewed it and concurred with staff's recommendation and made a motion to bring these forward for council's consideration today. This slide summarizes all other fund appropriations, not general fund or quality of life. So in revenue, the biggest increases that you will see actually relate to DIF as well as RBBD. In the expenditure side, we have a $2.2 million, that's the largest line item, and that relates to our next slide, that special ingredient that I referenced earlier, the American Rescue Plan. So kind of moving on to that one. The American Rescue Plan was an economic stimulus plan that was passed by Congress in March of 2021. All local governments received direct funding to help mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. Specific to this funding, all funds must be spent by December 31st of 2024. The city of Menifee received just over $13 million in ARP funds, and to date, the city has allocated $3.8 in direct expenditures. That relates to a number of smaller purchases, and then a larger one that is some cleaning micro robots for the police department, our NeoGov training module, and then our Smart Cities and Broadband Master Plan. And then for the adoption of our 21-22 budget, there was a $3.6 million transfer in that accommodated, specifically designated for personnel, which then freed up money for us to fund a number of CIP projects. In tonight's presentation and request, we are asking council to consider the approval of the following specific projects using American Rescue Plan money. That is approval of a mass notification system for $120,000. This specifically would provide a dedicated system and solution to communicate with the public regarding public health updates and other emergency alerts. We are also recommending $500,000 go towards a Holland Road project, specifically to add sewer and recycled water improvements. We are requesting $167,000 for PPE enhanced cleaning services, COVID-19 testing services, and just kind of capture all those direct kind of COVID charges that we are seeing and will probably continue to see for the upcoming, balance of this fiscal year at least. And then we are asking for $500,000 to be allocated to the Business Improvement Program. We understand that COVID directly impacted a number of our businesses, and in the first initial phase of the funding that we received, which was CARES Act, the city spent just under $500,000 in the CARES Act grants to directly make sure that our businesses got the lifeline that they needed in such a hard time. This time around, we are proposing to, again, use this one-time money for a business improvement program that would provide direct economic support to businesses to beautify and improve the exterior of the business sites, and this program would be spearheaded and managed by our Economic Development Department. And then lastly, we are asking that just $969,000 be used towards the support of purchasing a facility to help address and alleviating spacing needs at City Hall. As we all know, spacing here is, every space is essential, and we are quickly running out of space, especially as we are adding and requesting more bodies. So all in all, today, the recommendation to use this funding request is a request of $2.2 million. So in summary, for our mid-year review, if we wanted to kind of summarize what are the key points for our mid-year kind of perspective, we continue to experience steady growth, and that is true in our sales tax and our Measure DD and our other funds, and those are the good news. And then there are things that are beyond our control, that are beyond our boundaries, that extend to the region and globally even, that we will be facing in the upcoming months. So as we close out this year and we move on to our next fiscal year, we will take note of those and factor those in as we go. But we do know at this point in time, at our halfway point, and based on the strategic workshop that was recently held for our community and to our council, public safety continues to be of high importance. And so our biggest mid-year request this time around is the addition of the 15 additional PD personnel. We also understand the importance of connecting our budget operations to our strategic plan. Right now, we are under our 2018-2023 strategic plan, and as we identified items to include in our specific request for this, we wanted to make sure and made a concerted effort to make sure they connected to specific strategic plan action items or areas of strategic priority. As far as what has been accomplished to date for the first half of the year, well, you know, a lot of it actually is captured in our first inaugural annual performance report that was released at our last council meeting and summarizes department by department what was completed by each department. So for today, we have 4 specific actions we are asking council to consider. And that's accepting the fiscal year 21-22 mid-year budget and approve any additional budget appropriations and revenue recognitions as that they have been presented. In line with that, we ask that the council adopt the updated city's authorized position listing, officially approving these staffing changes. We ask approval of the partial use of American Rescue Funds plans as recommended. And then finally, we ask the approval of updating the 21-22 CIP program to include various CIP projects and update funding as presented for approval. That concludes my presentation from our end. I do want to thank everyone who attended here today and the staff that is involved here, the 281.65 people that were here at the beginning of the year, as well as our council, our commissions, our committees. I know that in each and every single one of us in our own way, in our own role, work day by day to make sure that we continue to make Menifee and build Menifee brick by brick, business by business, program by program, a thriving and safe and premier place to be. So we are available for any questions, and thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cornejo, and the entire team. I know you guys all, this is a concerted effort. So I do have a few council member comments in the queue, and we'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Dinas.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that, you know, I've gone through 30 years worth of mid-year budget reports, listening to them or putting them together, and this was excellent, easy to understand. It was refreshing. Some questions for you on the ARP. Is a partial expenditure of like almost 2.3 million. How much have we spent already to date, and then what will be the total amount we have spent with this if this is approved?
Okay, so how much we have spent to date, I believe, is the 3.8206, which, let me see if I can bring up that PowerPoint again. Tonight, we're recommending 2.5, and that would leave us a balance of 7.106.
Okay.
Yeah, so just over half.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have is, you know, it's good to hear that we're increasing our law enforcement. Who would have guessed we'd have grown so fast since we started just, you know, a short time ago? And, you know, the residents, you know, the overwhelming support for our police department. I think it's kudos to the management staff of the police department to build a culture that that's, you know, that our citizens can see. That's really great. My question, though, is that we've accelerated up from a 5-year to a 3-year program. The question, you know, my question, I don't know if it's a concern or a question, is more that, you know, well, in year 6 or 7 when we, you know, certainly we will have an economic downturn. My concern is that we do all this hiring, then we hit an economic downturn. You know, are we taking that into account by accelerating the hiring, and we'll be able to, without having to feel the pain, you know, year 6 or 7 or 8 if the economy decides to crash?
Yes, and that's why I was highlighting primarily the increased revenue in sales tax versus property tax. While we do see property tax increasing with the booming residential, that is a lag of about a year before we see that come through. But when there is a downturn and people ask for assessment reevaluations, that can go down as well. Sales tax, we anticipate, as we've seen over through COVID with all of the business closures, that we've remained constant. Not only have we remained constant, we saw one slight dip one month, but we were steadily increasing. So we are confident that even with an economic downturn and slowing in residential and even commercial growth, we still have the needs of our current residents, and we don't have, like I stated earlier, the excess luxury, unfortunately, but fortunate when we're talking about an economic downturn, our our retail are necessity retail establishments. So we forecast, even with a dip in the economy, and as we've seen the gas and construction cost increases, now we know that eventually it will come down, but we anticipate it to stay constant as it did during COVID.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good questions. Councilman Carwin's next.
Thank you very much. I am not afraid to admit when I don't know things, so that's why I ask you, because you're very learned. On the expenditure analysis breakdown, you've given us 3 categories that I understand are estimates, but they add up to 108%.
Yes.
So I understand rounding up and down can change the numbers, but 8% isn't a rounding issue. So why are we at 3 categories that add up to more than our budget?
Okay, thank you for that question. So when I say 53%, I mean 53% of the total personnel budget. In line, if we were looking at February, month to month, we would be basically at 66%, right? Because we're in month 8, we're at 53%. That means, our personnel expenditures are actually lower than if we were going literally month by month.
Okay, so this isn't of the total
Of the
budget.
total, exactly.
This is
It's by
of each category's
Exactly,
budget.
exactly.
That's what I wasn't understanding. And then my other question for you. Maybe it's just a comment. I was just going to say that I would, for one, would be in favor. I was looking at your the art plan and the city facility purchase budget. I, for one, would not have a problem reallocating my office to staff use. And I don't know how other council members feel about using their offices. I don't use it, and it seems to me my office is a waste of city resources being allocated to city council, and I would not have any problem adding some sort of amendment to reallocate city council offices. But if other council members are using them, I don't want to take anybody's office away. But mine personally, you can split it up into 3 cubicles. I don't care. But
We'll have it occupied. We'll have it occupied Monday.
You can even have 2 stories in there. It's a pretty tall ceiling. So I just wanted to throw that. If any other council member felt the same way, I'd love to hear it. But I don't need it. I don't need an office. But there's, for meetings in city hall, we've got considerable amount of conference room space and things like that. Council members are provided laptops to work from any kind of location. So for my needs, I wouldn't need it.
Agreed, it's a waste of my space as well.
All right.
Take it.
So while we're on that topic, let's just get a feel for all the council members. How do you guys feel about your space?
So I know we've talked about that before. It was just brought up by Councilmember Leesmeyer. If space is needed at City Hall, what I could see is maybe having the mayor have his office and then maybe one shared office for council members.
It's a good suggestion.
Mine is the only one decorated really good, except Dionysus has a Disneyland logo up in his, so.
I was actually going to suggest that as an option, because there is a need. We understand the mayor and at least one floater, but we would be happy as staff to occupy those offices if.
Pack my stuff up, throw it in my mailbox. I'll get it on Monday.
Okay, and I did want to say, I do use my space, so I'm glad you're speaking for yourself. I'm going to speak for myself. I do use my office. I have meetings in there often, so
I knew that there was, some of the spaces were being used, so that's why I didn't want to pass an amendment to abolish the offices. I know that they're necessary, especially for the mayor, but at least at this point, until we find a permanent location for City Hall, I have other resources.
Understood. And so that's why I kind of like Councilmember Sobeck's suggestion of maybe we consolidate that into 1 or 2 spaces. So maybe we can just kind of get there when we get there. So, but anyway, thanks for that. All right.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and then Councilman Carmen, did you have any more?
That was it.
Okay, next up is Lisa Sobeck.
Thank you. And on the police report, thank you for sharing this. And also just on the report general, I am just really happy that we are using our resources to benefit our residents and our businesses. And so I like how you're looking at the American Rescue Plan, that's really going to benefit our community. But on the police, when you mentioned on page 16, and you did the comparison, you mentioned that this was a comparison from 2020 with the Menifee projected new one. Were any of these others updated, or these old 2020 stats?
No, these are updated.
Okay.
We got the number from Hemet just yesterday afternoon, so.
Okay. And then on the response times, I do feel this is important, and we do need to get those response times down. And I know that, just talking to so many officers, and that we're a lot larger city with almost 50 square miles. And so I know that's part of it, is getting from one side to the other. It's nice to see that we have the funds to increase it at this time. I also had kind of a thought on the sustainability, and that came to the equipment. When it said it's a one-time purchase, how do we budget those newer, like when you're going to need a new vehicle, those are going to be purchases again. Are we going to be able to sustain that?
Yes, we actually have started a fleet replacement plan, and so we add to that fund every year, knowing that it's typically a 5-year lifespan for a vehicle, so that we're planning. We're adding each year to build up in preparation for that replacement.
And how does that work with all the gadgets and everything that we have to put into the vehicles? Are those able to be passed on to a new vehicle, or how does that work?
About the only thing that's not reusable is the cage system. If we go to a different, well, the Tahoes, they change every year. So those, but most of the electronics we can move over, and that's why, first off, we have a great public works department that takes care of our vehicles, but we're trying to make them last. That's why we don't hot seat them like the captain talked about. But they're hard to get, cars right now. So Dodge has canceled twice on us, 2 different orders. So we try to stay the same vehicle so that we can transfer all that stuff to the new vehicle, but we're at the mercy of the automakers.
Right now, okay. All right, well, I know we have a couple of our Measure DD committee members here. I want to thank them for their oversight, and just, again, reiterate what's been said, that I know this is all staff effort, so thank you. And thank you to our residents who shop local.
All right, next up is Councilman Leesmeyer.
Thank you, Margarita. Great job, really. You've been here a long time, and I think that was probably the best report you've given so far. So I really, genuinely, good job. Speaking to the offices, Bob, yeah, absolutely. I think we did talk about that during one of our closed sessions, and yeah, absolutely. It was a fun idea at the time, but we need the space, and you guys need the space, so please take mine. I don't know that you want us kicking around City Hall all day long anyway, so. Chief, really quick, since we're kind of drag you back up there for the PD questions.
Like the Prime Minister.
There's a joke in there somewhere with a movie, I know it. We're projecting to bring our sworn officers to that of our 25, 26 plan from the original study, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Don't worry. So we're projecting, right now, you're projecting to go to 91. And in the original analysis, we had planned 87 by 25, 26. So this year, we're going to exceed what we would have had in 25, 26.
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that next year, we may be coming back here and asking for another 5 or 10, and then another 5 or 10, another 5 or 10. I want to understand if that is a flaw in that projection model, or if that's just an ability that we have by virtue of having the increased funding. I know that's kind of a tough question, but I'm a little concerned, just a little bit, that the projections don't look the way we had anticipated them looking 2 years ago. And I know that we had an idea of what we were getting into, and that idea quickly changed when we actually got on the ground and realized what was really going on here. We weren't being told the whole story, right? So you follow where I'm going here? I just want to make sure that this doesn't continue to just creep up at a higher escalation rate than what we had thought about.
Can I take first crack at
Please.
partial answer? We did not anticipate this rapid continued growth. I mean, we were hoping for it, absolutely, because it helps our economics for the city, the increased residential, increased population. And I know we don't like that 1 per 1,000 scenario, but it is at least in some part true. If we have the increased population, we do need the increased police force behind it. And again, we did not anticipate it. This has come in twofold what we had put into our projections for the population growth, which is why we are accelerating the need for the increased officers.
Okay, so said differently, the population growth is equally accelerated at the 25, 26 number, more or less.
Correct.
We've increased that much more.
Even
that
surpassed,
fast.
yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that there's not this spike that's just going crazy, and it's matched up. Okay, thank you. Hang on. How are the vehicles holding up? We don't hear that very often. Are we having any problems with the vehicles? Things breaking down? People getting in accidents? What sort of thing?
We do have, when we chase people in pursuits and we go from asphalt to the dirt roads, we've had a little bit of damage, but I don't think if it was any other car than a Tahoe, we would probably have totaled vehicles for those kind of damage. And then we've had, officers crash once in a while, so we've had to deal with that. But, gosh, I don't even want to say it out loud, but knock on wood, it's not been bad. I've been in other agencies where they've crashed 4 cars in a week, and that hasn't happened here so far.
Okay.
Stop talking.
One of the questions on requested staffing, I know that the Student Resource Officer Program is something that has been talked a lot amongst the districts. Is that an extra need coming out of staffing, or is that just a function of a person's job?
So, two-part answer to that. One, council approved for the city to fund an SRO. So we have one school resource officer in training now, and we're going to try and get him into the school, one of the high schools, in the next month. We are in negotiations with Paris Union School District. We are very close to having them fund another one for the other high school. So we will most likely bring that back if we ratify that with them.
Okay. I'm good with police questions. I have others. Thanks, Pat. Thank you. Margarita, back in the very beginning, we were talking about growth, and you're talking about the numbers. I recently had a meeting with someone, and they were projecting a potential CPI increase of a double-digit CPI increase. So, are you tracking the same thing, and what sort of ripple effect does that have through our budget?
So that's the inflation and the price increases that are at 40-year highs right now, and that will be again reflected. We will see that impact in directly and indirectly. We could see that, you know, most directly as we ourselves procure and buy equipment and ourselves. We'll also see it in the fact that, you know, that as our builders start to continue to try to build, if they're dealing with the same CPI increases, that could, you know, not completely, hopefully, stop them from building, but it will slow the way that they're built because everything's more expensive. Everything's more expensive for them as well. So how do we factor that in? That is exactly what we're tracking to see kind of what the national forecasts and the regional forecasts say they're going to do. We, unfortunately, do have the luck to have one of the highest CPI increases in the whole country as we speak right now. Is it, again, to the original discussion, is it a sustainable situation to have prices go so high across the board, gasoline to lumber? No, but is it within our control to control CPI? No, so we got to work with what we get, and as we budget year to year, factor in that everything for right now and the foreseeable future will likely have an increased price tag associated with it.
Which you'll see more presented on that when we go through the budget workshop process for the next fiscal year budget upcoming.
Definitely, okay. All right, on your slide 23, your appropriations slide. There you go. So you have the CEQA revenue, and then you have the CEQA expenditure down on the bottom. I presume that's a pass-through, right?
Exactly.
So why not have the waste management do the same thing? You brought that up, so I'm asking you, why wouldn't you have the positive, the income on the top to balance this out?
Okay, that's a good question because that revenue has been already factored in the year, in the beginning when we adopted the budget. So we had that $300,000 that we received from waste management. That was effective as soon as the contract was executed. So we factored that receipt of that revenue every year. Has it always been used for this specific program? Not necessarily. This is the first time we're presenting this particular program, but it is already received. So we don't need to increase that revenue at this point in time because it was already budgeted. That revenue was budgeted in June.
So you're kind of reallocating it?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I think my last question is on the ask. So with respects to the updated CIP programs, I brought my budget book, but I didn't bring my CIP book. So I remember running through the CIP programs, and there were a couple things on La Piedra, I think, like, you know, La Piedra, Menifee, something like that. It triggered in my brain the signal at La Piedra and Murrieta, and then I started thinking, well, what else is there? And it made me want to run a quick comparison of just looking at the different things and seeing what's what, where things are, and that sort of thing. But I understand you want to try and program this right now. Can you? I guess specifically to that signal, because that's a pretty interesting intersection as we go into this stuff with the MWD. What is the timing on that intersection?
So Carlos is around. Maybe he can help answer the question. But that's the La Piedra and Menifee is the one that you're.
Murrieta.
Okay, the one that was in the program tonight is Menifee.
Right.
Okay, so you're asking about Murrieta.
Yep.
So we have that traffic signal considered for next fiscal year, council members. So we'll be able to come into you for consideration. And we are working with the MWDs because they need to do their work, get out of the way before we start doing our work as well. But we expect their work to be finishing towards the end of this year. And there's about a 6-month process for design, so it'll fall in line. Once they're done, then we can start our construction.
I was just thinking that if there was an opportunity to dovetail the work together as the road was shut down or before everything opened up, that way you guys wouldn't have to go back out there and tear it all up again, trying to put in footings and things like that. So I just wasn't sure of the timing of that signal.
Well, we know where their line is going. We have those drawings. We'll get those as-built. And I don't think they're widening the roadway per se. They're just installing pipe. That's all.
Okay.
Councilmember, they're also looking at doing revisions to their line work as well to have less impacts to La Piedra. We had that discussion earlier this week. They were looking at closing La Piedra for a couple weeks, but now they're looking at actually pushing the line outside of the road right away. But you're correct, they do have to cross at Menifee and La Piedra. One of the other things we need to look into are there might be some conditions of approval for some of the surrounding developments to add that signal as well. Quartz Ranch is in that neighborhood. I'll have to verify that what is conditioned through development plus what's in our CIP. But that's something that we look at when we go through the whole CIP program.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then I did have a couple of real quick things to say. I kind of just piggybacking off of Mayor Pro Tem's comment about ramping up some of the police programs so much quicker than we originally had planned. And anytime you do you stray from the plan and you double or triple your numbers, there's a flag that gets raised to make sure that it's sustainable should there be an economic downturn down the road. And you mentioned that, and I thought that was a good concern. So I guess we're fortunate to be able to see that our revenue numbers are able to support that today. But I echo his concern that we've got to be prudent and cautious down the road, make sure the decisions we're making to ramp up are going to be sustainable should there be a downturn. So that I just want to make that statement. You don't need to reply. The second one, on page 27, Margarita kind of shown some of the ARP programs like the mass notification system, Holland Road Sewer and Recycled, business improvement for some of the interior and exteriors. Some of these things, this is the first I've heard of them, so I don't know, maybe I should say I'm looking forward to the city manager kind of bringing those different things to us in the coming months, so we kind of are aware of what the plan is there. I don't know if you have an answer to that, if we're...
Well, the concept of dedicating the resources, we still need to kind of formulate the program, and we're going to work with our economic development department to make it into a grant program so that we only select the ones that need it, and then we're going to also try to come up with the uses of those funds. Is it critical improvement? We don't really want to be able to finance losses, but want to be able to finance an opportunity to grow the business. So we'll come back with a program later on and present it to the council for approval. And right now it's a concept.
Okay, so these are concepts, the mass notification system, very curious about, is that a social media thing, or is that something that
we do have
use smartphones, or how are we notifying?
Something in mind. I don't know, Ron, you want to chime in on some of your thoughts that you shared with us?
And it can be a 30,000-foot elevation explanation. I'm just kind of curious. Yeah.
Sure, and I'll also let my colleague here help answer that question. So at the 50,000-foot level, this is a way for us as a city to push out sort of like a reverse 911. If anybody happens to be in the area, we can push out an alert that says, hey, something's happening, stay away from here, go here, and I'll let you address that.
That is a great question. There are so many capabilities that a mass notification system can do. For example, we've all seen those text messages, email alerts. It's just a way of us being able to communicate any type of emergencies. For example, road closures, if we are doing evacuations, just a lot of capabilities with the mass notification system. There are some capabilities that the county has been doing, but it's a way of us being able to be in the front line and communicate with our residents. So we're definitely excited to possibly move forward with that, and we'll bring you every step of the way with the notification system.
Excellent, thank you. That was perfect. That's all I need to know.
On the mayor, can I ask a
Go ahead.
question on it? So I just want to say, that's something that we've talked about a few times as a city council, and I've even had an email this week asking, a resident asking, what are we doing as a city for emergency preparedness, emergency response? And so I'm glad to hear this. And I think this is one of the components that will help us be a safer city as well. So thank you for sharing that. Okay.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, on this topic, I had actually asked our CAL FIRE representative about them using Pulse Point. Pulse Point is a notification system that notifies maybe CPR certified people that can show up in a case of emergency and actually be a first responder. I wonder if there's an opportunity where we can partner with CAL FIRE to get something like this going in our city, realizing that CAL FIRE is a kind of a big beast. But it's a great thing to have. I like the messaging going out, but I'm also thinking that there might be an opportunity to plug in with the right people and get some resources out there. So, thank you.
Definitely.
All right, council members, anything else before we wind it down? Hearing none, Mr. Melching, we have 4 different things we're doing: accepting a mid-year budget, a resolution for position listing, approving ARP fund, approving the update on the CIP. Can we put it all into one motion, or do we need to take them separate?
One motion will do it, Mayor.
All right, council members.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right, and Madam Clerk, do you want electronic or? Man, am I on the wrong thing again? There it is.
Are you confirmed?
Okay, that passes unanimously, so I want to go ahead and just say thank you to everybody here on the team. It was a great presentation. Ms. Clayton, did you want to share something else to wrap it up?
I did want to
Okay.
close out by thanking the team, Edna and Wendy, who support Margarita, the whole finance team, Margarita for the amazing presentation and all of her time spent on this. And I would also like to take this time to introduce our new Chief Financial Officer, Regina Funderburk. If you could please stand and say hi. And I am very happy to announce not only that she's starting, but next year or next time she'll be sitting here. So thank you very much.
All right, welcome aboard. Yeah. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn, and thanks, everybody.